Hey everybody, Befron here, and today we are upgrading your commander deck for only $50. Let's jump in. Alright folks, so this is what we are doing, our commander deck upgrades of the new commander deck from All Will Be One, Corrupting Influence. So, like so many people do, I like to sometimes buy these decks and use them as is. Sometimes I buy them and take them apart for their reprints and other strong cards. In this case, I'm definitely keeping this deck. I really like the poison and infect and toxic and all those themes in this deck, so I'm keeping that, and I'm going to see what I can do with this deck. What I'm going to prepare for you today is a way to upgrade this deck for only $50. Again, only $50. It's a lot of money to spend on cardboard, but if you like the game, if you like this deck and you really want to put the investment into this deck, hopefully some of these recommendations are valuable to you and you can go ahead and try it. As a quick public service announcement, if you're watching this video, chances are you're actually not subscribed to me. In fact, only 1% of my viewers are subscribed. So if you want to help support the channel and see it grow, please don't forget to like and subscribe this video. Anyway, let's jump back in. So what I have here is ways you can upgrade this commander deck with about $50. I was looking at the TCG player value of some of these cards that we're going to go over today. Technically, I think they add up to about like $52, but the way I see it is if you take some of the cards that I'm going to recommend to take out of the deck out and sell them, you'll actually come out to about 50 exactly. So it's a little bit over, but some cards that I wanted to share, and they're kind of interesting cards because some are good for the deck and some are just very timely based on where we are today in Magic the Gathering and certain reprints that have come out. So I have all the cards that I want to take out of the deck listed right here. There's a couple that we'll go over too as kind of like an honorable mention or worth noting, but these are the main cards I want to take out and we'll talk about how to replace them. So what we're going to do first is removal. So these two cards are some of the removal from the deck. We have Phyrexian Rebirth, a 6-drop for destroy all creatures, and then create an XX Phyrexian Horror artifact creature token where X is the number of creatures destroyed in the play. This, I think, is very mediocre removal. Yes, you'll remove something and then get one big creature, but unless you can give it haste and attack in, and unless you've destroyed like 20 creatures because somebody's playing a token deck, I think it's actually kind of mediocre. My philosophy with removal is usually there's like one or two things you need to remove. You do not need to generally remove the entire board. Again, I like to remove things at instant speed at the one thing that's coming at me. So, I tend to look at, high cost removal very, skeptically and see what I can do to get rid of it. And then fumigate, similar thing, destroy all creatures, you gain 1 life. I would rather something cheaper here, right, than destroy all creatures, you gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. I would rather have something that's like a 4-drop. If you really insist that you need a board wipe, maybe go down to like a 4-drop. But so these are the two cards we're going to remove from the kind of removal category, and the two cards I'm going to recommend you bring in are Generous Gift and White Sun's Twilight. So which you swap in for which doesn't matter too much. I like these cards because Generous Gift, again, you need a little more coverage on your enchantments and artifacts. This deck is going to be able to remove creatures very easily. It's got a lot of poison counters in it. Removing creatures is very easy. Even removing indestructible creatures is easy because they're going to get -1/-1. They're not going to be destroyed by those poison counters. Their toughness is just going to go to 0. So I don't think you need to have a lot of dedicated creature removal in this deck because there's already so much in its normal operation and mechanic. So definitely worth playing a Generous Gift to give you coverage of some of those artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, anything else that you might need. Then White Sun's Twilight. Again, the nice thing here is that you get these Phyrexian Might tokens, and if you do really need a board wipe, you can pay 5 for it. So it would turn into a 7-drop, but you can pay 5 for it and destroy all creatures. And then that's kind of nice because then you have like a nice wide board, right? You destroy all creatures and you have a nice wide board of things that can poison your opponent. So much better card in terms of just like staying in theme. I mean, it's still an expensive, big flashy spell, but it stays in theme, I think, a little better for the deck versus just some generic removal. So that's what I'd play in there. Also, again, if you do like the idea of like just a board wipe, again, maybe you don't like the spot removal of Generous Gift, or maybe you want something cheaper than White Sun's Twilight, you can also pick up Wrath of God and replace one of those with that. Wrath of God was just reprinted in Dominaria Remastered, so it's only at about $1 or $2 at this point, so you can definitely pick it up. You can pick up a nice fancy old bordered one. I don't know if that one comes in borderless, but you know, definitely better options than I think what they give you right here. These cards are also timely. Of course, White Sun's Twilight just came out in All Will Be One, and Generous Gift was actually also reprinted in the other commander deck in All Will Be One, the red and white, you know, Boros commander deck. So you could definitely get that fairly easily. Moldavine Reclamation, good card if you have the deck that supports it. This deck is not a Aristocrats deck though, so I don't know if this deck really needs Moldavine Reclamation or really benefits from it. Whenever a creature you control dies, gain 1 life. There are a lot of small creatures, a lot of these, you know, you're going to be making a lot of these 1/1 might tokens, as you can see right here. So, you know, maybe if you use them as blockers, a lot of them will die, but it's a big cost to pay. And like, if you don't play a deck that really plays into this card, I don't know, I just think it's a little bit expensive, and you're not going to see a ton of benefit from it. Not a horrible card. I was kind of on the fence about this one myself. I play it in an elf deck actually, but that's because, again, the elf deck creates a lot of tokens. There's a lot of like 1-drop creatures that I just throw on the battlefield, and it's in a Jared elf deck. Jared, the guy who flings elves at your opponent. So it's sacrificing my elves, so that can be decent. This can be decent in that kind of deck. But in this deck, again, where you're not sacrificing your own stuff, you're probably not going to get a ton of benefit. It's a 5-drop, so kind of expensive. I would recommend replacing it with Phyrexian Arena. Now, you're probably thinking, well, of course, because Phyrexian Arena is a good card in any commander deck, any black commander deck. But I want to bring this one up now, again, because it is recently reprinted. You can get Phyrexian Arena now for about $2, $2.50 or so. So a really good card that you can get for relatively cheap, especially right now with this reprint. Next card I would take out is Golgari Signet. I really just think, you know, mono rocks in green decks are a little bit silly. You can always put lands out. I think having more lands on the battlefield is always better than just a mono rock that can get destroyed fairly easily. So what I would recommend instead of this card is a good old Nature's Lore. And again, you're probably thinking, well, Nature's Lore is good in every commander deck. Like, why is that special now? Nature's Lore was again reprinted in Dominaria Remastered. This is now like a 75-cent card, give or take. You can pick up a copy versus $2, $3, $4, $5 that it was before this reprint. So it was getting a lot of attention in reprints in Commander's deck, but this printing in Dominaria Remastered really helped it. So recommend you pick up a couple of copies of these anyway, but I think it's just a much better card than Golgari Signet. I would much rather have another land that's really hard to destroy than an artifact, which, you know, anything can destroy an artifact anymore. So definitely recommend swapping these two cards out. Again, play into the ramp of green. So put this card up here, down here, I guess, oh, this should be switched like this. So cards that we're taking out, cards that we're putting in. This next set of cards, so we have first Norn's Choir Master. This card is when a commander you control enters the battlefield or attack, proliferate. I'm not a big fan of these cards that only buff your commander, right? The Baldur's Gate had a lot of those in, backgrounds that said, you know, your commander has some effect. I just think it's expensive, right? The commander in this deck is a 4-drop. This is a 5-drop, so you'd have to have, you know, 5 like mana ready to go. You'd have to play Choir Master first if you want to get your commander to have the ETB trigger. Proliferate, there's just a lot easier ways to proliferate. I would recommend swapping this out, and this is probably the most expensive card in the review, but Yawgmoth Thran Physician. And again, this card was reprinted in Dominaria Remastered. This card was like $40 or $50 before that, and now it's like $17. So again, a little bit pricey. You can go without it. Again, Norn's Choir Master is not terrible. It's actually a $2 or $3 card, so you can get a little value out of it. And, you know, I still think it's a decent card, but Yawgmoth can do everything that Norn's can even faster. So you can get -1/-1 counters on creatures, draw cards, and you can proliferate all in one card, and protection from humans if that matters. But anyway, I just think that's a good swap, and again, just very timely given that this price of this card is relatively very low with this reprint in Dominaria Remastered. So we'll put him up here and Norn's Choir Master down here. The next few cards, I don't really have a one-to-one swap out, but we'll go through these kind of one at a time. Probably the card I would swap out for Mycosynth Fiend is one in the All Will Be One main set. Bloated Contaminator. It has Proliferate, it has Toxic and Trample, versus Mycosynth Fiend just gets big for each poison counter your opponents have. So, you know, that can be good at the end of the game, but like I don't really want or need big creatures in this deck. Like I want to hit my opponents for poison damage. I don't want to just have a big creature, right? If I really just wanted a big creature, I'd play a big creature. There's plenty of those in green. Don't really need that. I'd rather have a card that plays much more into the poison and proliferate. Noxious Assault. Creatures you control get +2/+2 until the end of the turn, and when a creature blocks this turn, its controller gets a poison counter. Good. I mean, I see why it's, you know, decent, why it's in this deck. Obviously, you make your creatures big. You want to not have your opponents block so they can attack. I mean, it's not bad, but for 5, it's a little pricey. I would play a card here like Hepatra. Again, just a little card that gives you a little bit of an engine. It's definitely a lot cheaper than this card in terms of mana cost, and it's only 50 cents. I'm trying to get one. Like I said, I don't have one right here, so I'm going to show you a digital version of the card, and hopefully I'll get it in the near future. So we'll take this card out. Scavenging Ooze, not a bad card. You get some +1/+1 counters, which then you can proliferate with. You can put some graveyard hate on your opponents, so it's not a terrible card, but I would much rather play here Venerated Rot Priest. This is one of the cards that, I don't know if you saw the set booster box opening on. Unfortunately, I didn't pull it, so I'll have to buy it. Venerated Rot Priest is probably one of the more expensive rares in this set. It's about $12 at this point, even though it's a brand new card. So I would probably just swap out Scavenging Ooze for that. Again, keep Scavenging Ooze for maybe one of your other decks. It's not a bad card, but you could definitely do something that plays into this deck a lot more with the Toxic and the Infect effects of Venerated Rot Priest. And finally, Phyrexian Atlas. Overall, like I say, I don't think you really need Mono Rocks in green. I could put in more ramp here, but there's actually already about 10 ramp cards in this. There's quite a few Mono Rocks in the deck already. And, you know, there's some ramp cards with Cultivate and the Nature's Lore that we talked about. So we don't really need another one. It's, you know, kind of has the Commander Sphere effect of add 1 mana of any color for 3. And then whenever Phyrexian Atlas becomes tapped, each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters loses 1 life. I don't really care about my opponents losing life, right? You're not playing for the life game, you're playing for the poison counter game. So you want to play into that. Having your opponents lose 1 life, doesn't really matter that much. I don't think that's going to make the difference. So what I'd recommend instead here is to play Contagion Engine. So this has always been a little bit of a pricey card, and unfortunately with All Will Be One coming out, it did spike a bit in price. So this is about $14 right now, which is why I put it in a sleeve. I don't even have a perfect copy of it myself. My copy is a little bit damaged, but you know, it's always been a pretty good card with a proliferate that you can keep doing every turn if you wanted to. But with Phyrexia All Will Be One, it spiked up to about $14. It was about like $5, $6, $7 before this, but definitely a card that you can probably understand went up in price. So if you can afford it, definitely get one of these. And I would think it's going to get a reprint soon. It's really been a while. You know, after the excitement around All Will Be One phase, you could probably pick it up a little bit cheaper. So that's Contagion Engine. Would recommend playing that instead of Phyrexian Atlas. So before we go into the next section of the video, I was really debating on whether or not we wanted to talk about utility lands in this episode, because lands are not always the most exciting part of a deck upgrade, but I think there are 3 that are really important for this deck. The first 2 are ways that will make your creatures unblockable so they can easily get through your opponent's defenses and put poison counters on them. The first is Rogue's Passage. Tap and pay 4 to make target creature unblockable. Again, that just is the most generic way to make your creatures unblockable. Then we have Access Tunnel, which is tap and only pay 3 to make a creature with power 3 or less unblockable. This is really good because most of the creatures that you care about are going to be these tiny little 1/1 mites that just want to hit your opponent for poison damage. So having that restriction about power 3 or less really isn't that much of a problem for you. And then finally, we have Murex. This is a new utility land that just came out and All Will Be One, and it creates more of these 1/1 mites that can put poison counters on your opponent. So definitely add all these in. you can probably get all 3 of them together for about $1 or so, maybe even less, so it will not really blow out the budget. And because this deck is already 3 colors anyway, you can easily take out a swamp, plains, and a forest, swap these lands in, and you should be all set to go. For those who really want to go the extra mile, probably the most classic land card for poison decks is Inkmoth Nexus, but this card is $30, $40, $50, especially even higher now with the release of All Will Be One. So definitely out of budget for this review, but if you are looking to go the extra mile, you'll definitely need to get that one. Anyway, let's jump back into the regular video. A few other notable mentions. There were a couple cards in here in this deck that were like the Ghostly Prison and Windborn Muse. There's another one like this. I was thinking about taking those out. I'm not too sure. This deck doesn't really need that. It's not, you know, you're gonna get enough creatures. I can understand why, because, you know, a lot of the creatures in this deck are pretty small. They're these little mites, this 1/1 mites with toxic. So, you know, I can kind of understand why you maybe don't want your opponents to attack, so you're going to put these cards in. I was kind of on the fence. I'm going to have to play the deck a few times to see like how good my blockers are. If I already have a lot of blockers and creatures and I can protect myself pretty well, I'll probably take these out. Otherwise, I can kind of see why they would be needed. I think there's also another one like these in this deck where you can pay Phyrexian mana, and then your opponents can also pay Phyrexian mana to attack if they want. So there's about 3 cards. I only have 2 of them here that have this Pillow Fort effect. And then for those who want the extra credit, this is definitely well above the budget. But if you're trying to go for like the best possible version of this deck that you can get, again, not in the $50 budget, so this is kind of like extra material that you can consider, I would definitely replace the Commander with Atraxa. Obviously, really great card. Atraxa adds another color to the deck too, which is blue at the same CMC as Excel. Scion of Atraxa, I mean, it's good. It has the toxic. It gives you some benefit from poison counters, a little bit of like draw or, you know, exile from the top of your deck. But Atraxa having that proliferate at the end of every turn is really good. Gives you a lot of more, you know, consistency in the deck and just churning out all those counters, hits all of your opponents, right? So I would probably switch to Atraxa, and then if I did that, I would play some of my favorite proliferate cards in blue. Just having that access to blue gives you access to a few more interesting things, like Thrumming Bird. We got a lot of reprints of Thrumming Bird in All Will Be One, so that's a nice and cheap card now. Tezzeret's Gambit, which gives you some draw and a proliferate, and an Inexorable Tide, which says every time you cast a spell, proliferate, which is pretty insane. If you can cast a few cheap spells after giving all of your opponents just 1 poison counter, you're basically going to win the game. So would recommend for those who really want to go above and beyond and are willing to spend the $60 for Atraxa, which is crazy, go ahead and do that. Again, I hope Atraxa gets a reprint in the near future, but until then, you're gonna have to cough up the money for her if you want. I don't even have a copy. I'm probably not gonna do that until she gets a reprint. But anyway, hope that's useful. Hope this is good for anyone just trying to make this deck a little bit more playable in a $50 budget. And for those who really wanna go above and beyond, try out that Atraxa and let me know how that goes. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please let me know your comments down below about the Corrupting Influence deck from All Will Be One. Let me know what you think of my modifications and upgrades. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.